Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here. And right off the bat, Is the Faithful says we need Manny to repick the schedule again. Well, you are going to get what you want in about a half an hour. Manny Hill will join and he will pick the schedule again. And only the football gods know how many wins Manny is going to be prepared to give them. We kind of chuckled when Manny picked them at 11-6 after they went 2-0. Well, maybe Manny is the one who is laughing now, but that kind of begins where I wanted to start the show. And I'll get into some few other things, and feel free, jump in the comments. Let me know what is on your mind. We'll talk for the next half hour. Then Manny will come on, answer your questions as well. And he will indeed absolutely be picking that schedule. But how many wins they getting? How many wins should Manny reasonably pick this Minnesota Vikings team to get after they have started 4-0? Because when you begin 4-0, and I was perusing around the interwebs today, I go on YouTube all the time and see, you'll be shocked, but my YouTube is about 60% old football stuff, and Rich Eisen pops up and Colin Cowherd and all these different analysts that the algorithm is giving me. You know why? Because they're talking about the Minnesota Vikings all of a sudden at 4-0. And there have been a few other times during my time covering the Vikings since 2016 that other people outside of this building, the national analysts, have been talking about the Minnesota Vikings. And sometimes it has led to a tremendous season or one of the biggest moments of the team's history in the Minneapolis Miracle. And other times it has led to disappointment, such as the 2022 playoff game against the Giants, the 2016 meltdown, where many things went sideways, which, by the way, Jeremiah Searles returns to the show tomorrow. Can't wait to get his perspective on that because he was on the 2016 team. Manny and I will talk about it as well. So how high are you willing to now set the bar that the Vikings have won their first 4 games? And to me, it matters with the fact that 3 of those games have been against teams that are really, really good. And the other game against the Giants, when they did it, I think we all left New York thinking, maybe Brian Daboll is going to lose his job. But since then, it's not like the New York Giants have played horrendous football. They went toe-to-toe with the Dallas Cowboys the other night. They got a win a couple of weeks ago. Or wait, no, close loss with Washington. And maybe they won a couple of weeks ago. I didn't look at the standings of what the Giants have been doing. The pre-show prep should have been, what have the Giants been doing? Did they get a win? Yeah, they got a win. Was it against Cleveland? Yeah, I think it was. So, okay. I mean, that's not a good team. They're 1-3, but they look better against the other teams that they've played than they did against the Vikings. The Houston Texans bounced back and they win yesterday. They've won every game outside of playing against the Vikings. San Francisco blasted the New England Patriots yesterday. They shouldn't have lost their game to the Rams 2 weeks ago. That's still, despite the injuries, they have a very good team. And I expect that the Green Bay Packers will still be one of the clubs that the Vikings are racing against at the end of the season for the NFC North crown or for playoff position or whatever it might be, because look at the talent on that team. The Vikings most certainly saw that in the second half. So they beat all teams except for the Giants that have playoff possibilities. And I don't think that the Giants have been a laughingstock since, even though they most certainly were against the Vikings in week 1. They've made good teams look much worse than they actually are. However, it is only 4 games through the season. There's a long way to go. We can't even say the quarter mark of the season anymore because it's not even quite that. Once we get to about halfway through the second quarter, maybe, of the Jets game, then it will be the quarter mark of the season. But so much can change in a long year. We even witnessed this last year where the Vikings started off so slowly, then they won a couple of games in a row. Was it 4 games in a row that they won? Because they won San Francisco, Green Bay, Atlanta, and then New Orleans, and did not end up making the playoffs. The reason that I think that this will be sustainable for the Vikings to have one of those seasons that pops up every so often with this team is, first of all, the coach has a double-digit win season before. So this isn't someone that's brand new that we're just learning about. We're not saying, as we were in 2022, well, can Kevin O'Connell really get them there? Can Brian Flores really get them there? These guys are incredibly experienced coaches who are not going to have their teams get to 4-0, 5-0, 7-1 or whatever, and then just lose their minds. And what happened last year, I don't think is that relevant because of who was playing quarterback and some of the injuries that they had on defense. I did not attribute that meltdown at the end of the year to miss the playoffs to anything more than Dobbs and Mullins not being able to get them over the hump. But you do have to manage success. I still look at the veteran players on this team and go, which one of these guys hasn't had at least some success so far in their career before, or is 4 or 5 years into their career? I mean, you look at the defensive side, someone like Jonathan Grenard, he's been around for a few years. Last year, he was in the playoffs with his team, the Houston Texans, and they had a lot of success last season. The guys that they've brought in, Van Ginkel, Stephon Gilmore, has been at the biggest stages of the NFL. Not players that you would expect to get high on their oats, as Mike Zimmer once said. And so I'm putting the bar pretty high. Do I want to go higher than 12, though? I think that's where it gets hard for me, because regression is possible. Regression from playing this well, dominating to this point. Well, just the regular roller coaster element of the season. But in the past, when I've looked at what the bar is to potentially be a Super Bowl team, it's usually 11 or 12 wins. It's usually about a plus 100 point differential. And I don't see any reason that the Vikings cannot get to that point where they're entering the playoffs with enough to be making a case for themselves as a Super Bowl type of team. Now, that doesn't mean that they'll go in as the favorite. It doesn't mean that they'll win the Super Bowl. It just means that the profile of a Super Bowl team, a team that at least goes. I did this by looking at the last maybe 15 years of teams that reached the Super Bowl, won or lost, and just looked at how good were they at everything? How good were they at offense, defense? How many wins did they have? Just trying to paint that picture of the average type of team that reaches the Super Bowl. And that's what I came up with, that they at least need to have an elite passing game, which the Vikings have had that or borderline to that so far. I think it's been an elite passing game. They usually end up having to have a good defense. It doesn't always require that they're the best. And they almost always have to get to 11 or 12 wins. I mean, there are those outlier seasons, but you got to go back a ways now to the Packers in the wild card. Tampa Bay may have been a wild card team when they won it, but Tom Brady was their quarterback. It's usually about 11 or 12 wins if you're going to reach the Super Bowl. And I don't think that it's insane to start setting the bar around 12 wins for a team that starts 4-0 and plays this well. But you can let me know in the comments if you think that I am going a little bit too far with setting the bar that high. But I just don't see, aside from a quarterback injury, where the big area of regression. If you told me that Justin Jefferson kept being great, like, okay, I've seen that since the minute he was drafted. Will Jordan Addison make catches like he did yesterday and get open with route running? Yes, he will. Will Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill keep stopping the league's best pass rushers, which, what a performance against the Green Bay Packers by both of those guys. A combined 1 quarterback pressure against Darrisaw or O'Neill, which is just flat out ridiculous. But I don't see why they're not going to continue to be good. These defensive players, Harrison Smith, Gilmore, Cashman, Grenard, Van Ginkel, Metellus is even proven now at a big enough sample size that he could play as well as he can. I mean, it's not a perfect defense, I don't think, but when they have this much talent, there's no area where I say, well, that guy's off to a hot start, but he'll probably fall off. The only area is turnovers. That asking a team to get 4 turnovers to win a game is a lot. And they have turned over the other team a ton. So they are going to have to play games where they don't immediately just get an interception and still win. But even on a play-to-play basis, when the game was not completely out of hand and Jordan Love's just heaving prayers over and over again, how good have they been? I think it's been very good just in the play-to-play, down-to-down basis. I'll have to check, or someone could tell me what DVOA is saying about that, which is the Football Outsider stat invented by Aaron Schatz that has been good at kind of giving you a snapshot of when it actually matters, how good has your team really been. But I have to think that the Vikings would be pretty high. So let's get into your comments. Mike says 4-0 is 4-0. There definitely were things not to like, but so much to like. Also, the defense did well, but when the Packers went up tempo, didn't allow Flores to use those packages and fresh troops. I think that's true. They also didn't get home on the blitzes, that they rushed Jordan Love 51% of the time, I believe it was, on blitzes, and he performed okay. So Green Bay did seem to figure out some of those blitz packages. Also, I think that Jordan Love is just really awesome at not taking sacks. This is one of the best things that he does. And when you blitz, there will be opportunities downfield. It was such a give and take from him, though, because some of the downfield plays really worked and got them going quickly, and other downfield plays resulted in a horrible interception by Jordan Love. And that ultimately played into that, 4 turnover game by the Packers. And if the other team is in distress all the time because they're losing like that, then they will turn the ball over more. But yeah, I mean, I think if the biggest criticism through 4 games of the defense is, hey, when you guys are up 28-0, but then again, one of the touchdowns is not their fault at all. I mean, there's a strip sack, and then immediately 2 plays later, it's a touchdown. You can't really put that on the defense. And even the last touchdown where they do get the onside kick, I mean, they are just desperately flailing at anything, and they go all those yards and they rack up all those yards. But those of us who watched 6 years of Kirk Cousins play for the Vikings, remember, was it 5 or 6? Remember how many times the Vikings were in the position that the Packers were, where they got down and then they had long drives and they put up a bunch of stats. And, I was thinking about Justin Jefferson today, where he averages 5 catches and I think 86 yards a game, or 89, something in that range, which is below what he normally does. And one of the reasons is because Justin Jefferson isn't down 20 points, catching pass after pass, trying to desperately get back in a game anymore, that they've been up. So you're not usually trying to force the ball to him. Personally, I think they should do that more. And Kevin O'Connell said the same thing. This is something I've gotten commonly today that I wanted to address from Jason. Says, please stop using PFF grades. They are a joke. Compare the stats and PFF grade for week 4 of Sam Darnold and Kirk Cousins. No way based on the stats should Kirk be higher than Sam. Well, the reason that PFF exists and is so important to analysis of football is it takes you away from the box score stats. So one of the things that PFF is supposed to do is look at a linebacker, for example, and say, okay, maybe he had 20 tackles in a game, but were they all 10 yards down the field? Because back in the day, we used to say, oh man, that guy led the league in tackles. He must be fantastic, but it also might be because his defense was bad and he was on the field the whole time or something, right? Contextualizing what actually happened beyond the box score is what PFF does. So Darnold had a bad grade for this game, a 45.5, which I'm sure most of you are saying, are you serious? They scored a bunch of points. They won the game, and he had the biggest drive. And how could this possibly be? Well, allow me to explain. In fact, I will explain I got a very similar email, and I will read you what I wrote back to the email. So a supporter named Eric wrote about the same exact thing, said it's very confusing what PFF is doing with their grade. And I'll read my response. I said that the reality of the PFF system is that its biggest struggle has always been with quarterbacks. And I mean, just as an aside, think about how many things go into a quarterback performance that you're trying to capture versus an edge rusher. Edge rusher rushes passer, pressures, not pressures. It's not that hard to figure out if you focus on that guy. Whereas a quarterback has so many moving parts to try to capture all at once. Did you make the right read? Did you make an accurate throw? Something cannot look accurate, but be in the only place where the guy can catch it. Is that a good or a bad play? There's so much context that has to go into it. Anyway, so I said, it is often not like Jared Goff and loved Andy Dalton. There's some weird results every week that are so different than the box score that it can feel like it's mind-boggling. But the thing with Darnold's grade from yesterday is that turnover-worthy plays will destroy a quarterback's grade. He threw an easy interception to the Packers on the first drive that we all forgot about, but did not get caught by the Packers defender. He also threw the interception in the end zone, which he stuck on that read to Aaron Jones out of the backfield, telegraphed that throw. It would have been a pretty negative play, underthrew it. And then also they likely downgraded him for the fumble, which they probably said was his fault, holding on to the ball too long or not identifying the blitz there. And if you only throw 28 passes and you have 3 turnover worthy plays, that's going to, excuse me. Oh, sorry about that. Came out of nowhere. Sorry. That's going to destroy your grade. See, I was so caught up with the grade that it threw me off. I got emotional talking about this PFF grade. But the point being that 3 turnover worthy plays is big negative hits in the PFF grade. He only had 2 by PFF in the first 3 games. So you can see how that would really hurt a grade when he has those plays. But the box score is not going to show that first interception because it didn't happen. So you can always say, well, it didn't happen. But if you throw it to the other team and they drop it 100 times, in a row or something, okay. But that's not what happens, right? They usually catch it half the time. And if he catches it, it might be a different ball game. So he deserved a turnover worthy play for that. Also, the other thing is that some of the throws that were the most meaningful, including the touchdowns. Okay, the touchdown to Jefferson's great. The touchdown to Addison, he is wide open. Every quarterback in the league hits him for that touchdown. The other one was a screen pass to Josh Oliver. Quarterback rating is going to go bananas for those touchdowns, but they weren't something that you would grade spectacularly. This doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It does not mean that he didn't throw on time, that he didn't come through in the biggest moment in that game, which he did. But even the Justin Jefferson throw that got him 17 yards to start that drive was a wide open pass. And the throw to the sideline is an amazing catch by Jefferson, which I'm sure they gave more credit to. So when you pick apart the performance, I think that this was the sloppiest game that Sam Darnold has played so far. He has been really, really good, was a top 10 graded quarterback heading into this, and is still a highly graded quarterback by PFF. But if they're going to do this thing where they evaluate the plays and not just the box score, then you have to go along for that ride sometimes. Where I think that they miss is sometimes where a quarterback is rightfully aggressive and it doesn't work out and they will downgrade him for a throw. Okay, well, sometimes it's good to be overly aggressive to somebody like Justin Jefferson, for example, but if it doesn't work out, you might get a negatively graded play. The other thing that they're not always good at is when a quarterback throws to the right spot at the right timing, it's more important oftentimes than the actual placement of the ball. So Jared Goff has this happen. Somebody's wide open because he's timed out the play and read the defense perfectly, and the ball's back here and he doesn't get a plus throw for it from PFF. And aggressive quarterbacks get downgraded more than Andy Dalton, who will check down a bunch of times and get a high grade. And Kirk would have this happen as well. So it's very difficult to grade a performance. But when I look back at it, I think it's great to win the game, to get your team up 28-0. He took advantage of a lot of stuff, including how good his wide receivers are. He operated the offense excellently in yesterday's game overall. But if you tell me that you weren't a little bit nervous after he throws the near pick, after he throws his second red zone interception of the year, after he takes that sack where he didn't seem to have quite the awareness, which did happen a couple other times so far this season. One time, Nick Bosa almost got him, and he held on to the ball, but it was very close. There's been times where it's been a tightrope with him so far, and that is probably the Sam Darnold experience. Grading him as low as they did, 45. If you had asked me, I would have said it probably would have been closer to a 70, but they really heavily weigh something like those turnover-worthy plays, which I think is fair because that is the thing that has downgraded Sam Darnold as a quarterback for his entire career. If he didn't have the turnover-worthy plays in his career, he would be a really good quarterback. But that's the thing that's always plagued him. And if there's one thing that's worrisome about the rest of the season when we talk about how many games they can win, it is that one thing. So hopefully that kind of clears up why that grade ended up working out that way and why it was so much different than the box score. And just for the record, if you're asking me, I think Dane Mizutani and I yesterday, we gave Sam Darnold a B plus. We thought overall he did the job he was supposed to do. And despite the mistakes, still was there for them in the biggest moment. And I think it's a B or a B plus type of performance, but you can't throw the picks. I mean, he almost had 2 picks and you can't fumble the ball. You can't lose it that many times. Almost never are you going to, let's say he had thrown the interception to start out the game where he threw it right to the Packers defender. How many times can you overcome that many turnovers? The answer is not many. They were lucky to get 4 away from the Packers and the skill and luck, but you're not going to normally take the ball away that many times. So you do have to downgrade the performance for that. All right. Hopefully that makes sense. Elijah says, I would consider Lawrence in this class. I think a guy like Deion Walker could be really good and much cheaper. So I'm 50-50 on it. What are we talking about here? Are we talking about, I don't know who we're talking about there, Elijah. Are we talking about getting players? Are we talking about draft? I'm a little confused on that. I just clicked it because it looked reasonable, but I don't know who these people are. If you're talking draft, I'm not there yet in my life. I'm sorry. Dustin says, Matt, can you please explain for the 100th time what DVOA is and how it works? The the analytics hour here with Matthew Coller on the Purple Insider live stream. Well, Dustin, DVOA needed a better name, to tell you the truth. It's value over something. Honestly, it's been so long that it's been around that I don't remember what it stands for. But the idea with DVOA is to get rid of the noise. For example, when you are up 28-0, you are going to give up a ton of passing yards. The other team usually doesn't score that much like they did with the Packers yesterday, but that's just a fact. You're going to give up passing yards when you're up 28-0. What it aimed to do was downgrade those or adjust for those so they don't get as much credit against your defense. Put it this way, if they had named it smart yards, it would have made a little bit more sense. And it adjusts for score and a number of other factors. I think that it doesn't worry about turnovers because of how random they can be when assigning the value, or there's certain values to turnovers that have been mathematically figured out. But what it aims to do is give you an idea of how strong your football team actually is. And it definitely worked in 2022. I remember having its inventor, Aaron Schatz, on the show and saying, Aaron, why does your stats say the Vikings are like the 24th ranked team? And he acknowledged that sometimes it's a little aggressive and there's no way they were that bad, but there was something there saying this team is not matching up with what their actual record is in terms of their real talent. And remember, they were giving up 400 yards a game then, and we all knew that, yeah, I mean, at some point, this is going to come tumbling down in 2022, and it eventually did. Is the Faithful says, I just think Green Bay defense is bad on top of players like Kenny Clark not showing up this season. It is true that Kenny Clark did not have the same type of game he usually does, and a shout out to Garrett Bradbury. All week we talked about that advantage for the interior, but then speaking of my YouTube algorithm, it was giving me Aaron Nagler and Cheesehead TV, and the headline of their recap of the Vikings-Packers game was, where did the quarterback pressure go? Because they did not get after Sam Darnold outside of the hit and the fumble, and he was not under pressure a whole heck of a lot. It was about 30%, 30-something percent of his dropbacks. And I was giving a lot of credit to the offensive line, but you're right. Clark has been playing with an injury. He's also on the older side. You do have to give credit to the Vikings tackles, but where I disagree is that they're bad. I don't think that they have a bad defense. They have a talented defense, but if Clark doesn't play at a high level and they don't have Jair Alexander, they're not going to be that great. They're not going to be at all exceptional. With their offense, they still should be a contender for a playoff spot. But we saw some of the holes in the cheese yesterday for sure. Jonathan says Colts, Jags, Titans, Bears should be a relatively easy stretch. That's the wild thing about this schedule. It truly is. is the hardest part of it. We were saying before the season that if they just got through this at 2-3 to start the year, that they could make the playoffs. That's how stark the difference was between the beginning of the schedule and the middle of the schedule. Will Levis is not only bad, but now hurt, and Mason Rudolph is playing in this game. The Jags are an absolute disaster. Doug Peterson said his offensive coordinator called a great game and then blamed the players. He's got to be fired. And the Colts, Anthony Richardson is banged up. Looks like he's going to be okay, but he's kind of a wild ride and a young quarterback. Really like the way Caleb Williams played yesterday. He's starting to have it click in a little bit, but still a young quarterback against Brian Flores' defense. Those are all extremely, extremely winnable games. So it is hard to not start going down the road of, do we get 12 or more? Is that what we're really talking about here? Do we have on our hands a Minnesota Vikings classic 12-13 win season that we never saw coming? Ken says 13-4 will split with Green Bay, Detroit, Jets and Cardinals, maybe Seattle, 70-30 on Seattle. Yeah, Seattle looks like a great team. That's going to be a tough matchup. It's not that they don't have any difficult matchups the rest of the way. The Cardinals can play a little, but they don't look great. The Jets can play a little, but they don't look great. The Rams, they don't look great. Like, there's a lot of the Rams might go into selling mode by the time the Vikings end up facing them. I think it was Peter Schrager who suggested that they could even trade Cooper Kupp. And at that point, I mean, are they even looking, if they're way out of it, are they looking at, will another team want Matthew Stafford for the stretch run to potentially trade him away? They might feel like they are so far down that they don't have much of a chance by the time the Vikings get to them in the middle of the season. So then the teams that you think, okay, are 50-50 or worse matchups, Detroit is at the top of that list. That still is a really good team. I don't think we've fully seen what Detroit can do yet. And the Arizona you mentioned can get hot and has the talent and the quarterback. And Seattle at Seattle might be the toughest game of the entire rest of the season. But outside of that, there isn't too much terror when it comes to the opponents that the Vikings are facing, not after the way that we have seen them play. So let's see here. Go to Earl says, Jets win, Vikings at home versus Lions win, Rams win, Colts win, Jaguars, another hot garbage show win, Titans also hot garbage, 6-0 the next 6 games, 10-0 is possible. I don't think that 10-0 is actually possible, but it's funny because you get to a point where you keep saying, well, it's going to happen eventually. It's going to happen eventually. And when they don't have that drop off game, and even the second half is kind of the drop off game, but yet they still hold on to win. It's like, when are they going to fall apart? But if you were talking about, think about just how crazy this is when you get a 4-0 lead on the season, is that you got them at 6-0. Even if they go 4-2, then after 10 games, that puts them at 8-2. Even if they just go 4-2, which would be a decent result considering who they're playing. Mike says, are the Vikings buying at the trade deadline? Yeah, I mean, if they are, what's the trade deadline? Is that week 8? They move it around. Must be week 8, right? There was talk that it moved back, and I don't remember if it did or not. But anyway, 7 games into the season, if they're 6-1, then you have to be having that discussion. You might look around and go, what do they need to buy? Another corner could be something. If somebody is selling a corner, a guard, I mean, are you making a trade deadline deal in the middle of the season for a guard, an additional running back? I mean, wide receiver, they're pretty set there. Someone will get injured, maybe another pass rusher on defense. You can never have too many. Dallas Turner didn't have much of an impact on yesterday's game. Maybe there's somebody that Flores likes as another chess piece for the defense. But I mean, my answer is yes, of course. And if you look at what they did with TJ Hawkinson, where with TJ Hawkinson, they trade for him and then they sign him to an extension immediately, that is something they could look for somebody who could be for the future. Well, let us bring in Emmanuel Hill. Manny, the people are shouting from the rooftops. Manny, Manny, pick the schedule. Do. Pick the schedule. That's what's been going on for the first 30 minutes. And a lot of people have just kept watching as I did that repeatedly. You'd be surprised. What's up?
Yeah, I'm ready to pick this schedule, man. After what happened yesterday afternoon, I mean, I know the second half was shaky, and I was in the moment watching the second half of that game. I was kind of losing my mind over the way things were transpiring, but at the end of the day, they're 4-0, man, and I'm excited. It's really time to really re-examine how this team could finish in the final 13 games of the season.
Can I ask you real quick? What was the part about yesterday and the comeback that bugged you the most?
Honestly, it was probably, and my mind goes into weird places with stuff like this. It's probably not what a lot of people would think. Honestly, it was the 3rd and 1 on the second to last possession of the first half where you've got the ball. I don't know if it was like the 40-yard line or something like that, 35-yard line, something like that. It's 3rd and 1. Just run the ball, KOC. Run the ball. You try to throw to Brandon Powell, and it's a bad throw by Sam Darnold. Brandon Powell ends up getting hurt, and then it kind of becomes a domino effect because Powell has to temporarily come out of the game. You put Jalen Naylor in as a punt returner. We saw what happened there. And that play basically handed the Packers 7 points. And if you take that out, I think we might be talking about somewhat of a different second half where the game doesn't come down to, 1 or 2 possessions the way it did. But that was kind of the moment where it's like, what are we doing here? You're up 28-0. You're in full control of this game. Stop trying to be cute, KOC. You just you hit that pass button just one too many times. It's 3rd and 1. Run the ball, get the first down, and then maybe you get in the field goal range before the half and go up 31-0 at halftime. And at that point, the Packers might be demoralized and they might be done. Whereas you see the way things played out, they get the touchdown before half. Now they're feeling good about themselves. They're feeling much more confident. They feel like they can still come back and win. And then we kind of saw the way the rest of the game kind of played out. So that was probably the one play where it's like, as you sometimes say, don't do that. 3rd and 1, KOC, yeah. Don't do that. Just run the ball. It's okay.
There's probably 4 different times where I felt that way. Remember when in 2019 opener against the Atlanta Falcons, they won the game and Kirk threw 10 passes and I think he was 8 for 10. And it was because it went just like that. They were up by so much early on against the Falcons. They got a couple picks and I think Anthony Harris might've had 2 picks or something. And it was just like, okay, just run the football the rest of the day and go home with a win. And there's no way Atlanta's going to score this many points coming back. And they didn't. And Kirk actually did a great job in that game, hit a couple of big passes, game over. Good night. We'll see you later. That 3rd and 1. And then the 2nd and 1, when they get into the red zone, that was the and one that drove me crazy was you're up 28-7. And I think the Packers had just punted. They got a big play to Jordan Addison. They got a big run by Aaron Jones, and you're sitting at 2nd and 1. Jones has just run for 9 yards at the 21-yard line or something like that. If you just kneeled down 3 times and then kicked with Will Reichard, what's your chances of Green Bay coming back at all? I mean, if you're up 31-7, that is 4 scores that they need to put on the board in the second half. It's just not happening. There's not enough time to do it. And instead, here comes the tricky little out of the backfield. I think they call it like a rail route or something for Aaron Jones trying to swing out toward the goal line. Darnold throws the interception. Like, buddy, Sam Darnold's still your quarterback, and he's still capable of doing some of that stuff. That's the second time we've seen him do it when they had points on the board. So it's nitpicky when we're complaining about not winning by enough for a team that's 4-0. But I think that if there's anything that was bothersome from the game, it's probably that. Okay, let's pick this freaking schedule. Let's not go on about that. The Vikings are 4-0, Manny, and they go to London to face off with the New York Jets of New York. Do they win or do they lose?
I am going to call this a win. I think
Okay.
it'll be ugly, but I think it'll be the win. The Jets are just a mess right now. It doesn't seem like Aaron Rodgers and Robert Saleh are on the same page. I know the weather was ugly yesterday in New Jersey, but the Broncos are not a very good team. They have a pretty good defense, but their offense is a mess. And the fact that you just couldn't get anything going offensively against that team and find a way to grind out a win has me really concerned about the Jets. So I'll call that a win for the Vikings.
They lost to a quarterback who threw for 60 yards. Now, you
Yeah.
got to give it to Bo Nix. Didn't turn the ball over. If you don't turn the ball over, Marty Schottenheimer would have been proud of that kind of win, where he averaged 2.4 yards a pass and win the game. Congratulations, Bo Nix, his second win of his career. The bye week, as long as there are no arrests, you can't lose the bye week. Now we'll come back October 20th in a game that I cannot wait for. Also, a
Yes.
Purple Insider revenge game. Former intern Haley English works for the Detroit Lions. So that's a big one for this here operation, but a big one in the NFC North. Is that a win for the 5-0 Minnesota Vikings?
I will call that a loss, only because it's hard to start out 6-0. It's really hard. We don't see teams do it a whole lot. And I think at some point this team is going to lose a game. And I think, even though it would suck to lose to the Lions, a division team that you're kind of chasing right now, just in terms of like pecking order in the NFC North. The Lions are still a very good team, and we'll see how things play out tonight as they're up 7-0 on the Seahawks right now as we speak. So the Lions are a very good team. I know it'll be home against US Bank Stadium, but I'll call that a loss on the schedule.
Well, if there's anybody who has no problem whatsoever with US Bank Stadium, it is Jared Goff, who just has
Yeah.
been totally, since that first game he played with the Rams, he's been totally fine inside the Viking Stadium. So understandable, 6-1. Then just a couple days later, I will get in a Airbus and fly myself out to Los Angeles, California. And hopefully this time I will not get lost in this stadium and start calling for emergency people to come save me. It's a weird situation, Manny, where the LA stadium is built deep into the ground. So it's not that far above the ground. So when you exit through like the fourth or fifth floor, not the bottom, like every other stadium in the world. So I, after the game, just went down as far as it went, which is what you usually do in every stadium, and had no idea how to get out because I was deep in the earth, close to molten lava. So then one person I found, I mean, it was late at night, you're covering the game, one person, just a janitor. I was like, dude, how do I get out of here? He's like, you're nowhere close, man. You got to go all the way back up to the fifth floor. It was a terrifying experience. That has nothing to do with you picking the game, but I'm still shaken from that, and we won't make that mistake again. So the 6-1 Vikings face the Rams.
It's kind of like what they say about Madison. It's kind of like the opposite of Madison Square Garden, right? Because isn't like I've never been to MSG, but you walk in, you actually have to like go up a flight of stairs or like an elevator or something to go up to the floor, up to the arena. But anyway, the Rams, man, they just don't look good right now. And I know we know Sean McVay is one of the great coaches in the NFL, and Matthew Stafford, has had a great year last year, and you kind of thought maybe they would build on that. But they just don't look good right now, and they, had a bad loss to the Chicago Bears yesterday. It's going to be, I would imagine, a pretty good traveling crowd in favor of the Vikings as well. So I will call that a win in Los Angeles.
A lot of injuries in LA, and we'll have to see what Puka
Yep.
Nacua and Cooper Kupp's status is. But that is the main thing, is that they have been super banged up. And I just wonder if they're sellers at that point, if we are reaching them, getting close to the deadline and saying, well, and I will say that the big thing that we brought up over and over a bit again about the Rams trading for Stafford and going all in was, if it doesn't work, they are going to have a very tough time being great on the other side of that. And we're looking at potentially 2 of the last 3 seasons missing the playoffs, first round elimination. They have not been able to be the same version, and Aaron Donald retiring is a problem there as well. So now we're talking about the 7-1 Minnesota Vikings coming back home to face presumably Anthony Richardson, unless he is injured again. And if that's the case, then Joe Flacco and the Indianapolis Colts at US Bank Stadium. Now, Manny, I do feel that you got to work in a massive letdown game at some point because, and I'm not suggesting this for this one, but this is a staple, is the massive letdown game. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to influence this thing, but they're 7-1 at this point.
It's like the Giants in 03 when the Vikings started out 6-0 and a bad Giants team came into the Metrodome, and with, kind of an aging Kurt Warner at that point, they weren't very good. And the Giants ended up winning. Jeremy Shockey, I think I remember having a big game that day and beating the Vikings. Yeah, this one is tricky. I don't think I think there will be a letdown game, but I don't think it will be this one. So I will give the Vikings the win at home against Indianapolis.
8-1 Minnesota Vikings.
Woo!
8-1
Yeah.
heading to Jacksonville until it actually happens. I'm going to keep talking about how much I'm looking forward to golfing in Jacksonville leading up to that game, because that's all I'm going to be caring about for that one. I think if the Vikings are 8-1 and Doug Peterson has been fired, which is right around the corner. Hey, how about the owner saying that this is the most talented Jacksonville game? I almost flew to Jacksonville and tried to fight him in an alley. Our team, the most talented team. He said this is the most talented Jacksonville team that's ever been put together as far as players. Fight me. I want to fight.
Well, they own AEW as well. So if you go down there trying to fight them, they'll probably just take one of the wrestlers and send one of those guys after you.
I mean, Mark Brunell, my dude. Mark Brunell is way better than Trevor Lawrence. Fred Taylor is way better than any running back you have. Yeah. Jimmy Smith, Keenan McCardle, Tony Baselli, Tony Brackens, Donovan Darius. What are we doing here? And I'm sorry, I don't need to rant about the other team every time we get to a team, but you're picking them like a madman. So you need some distraction here. 8-1 playing Jacksonville.
I think this is going to sound crazy, but this could potentially be the letdown game, because Doug Peterson might not even be the head coach anymore at this point. I mean, he's trending to he's trying to get himself fired tomorrow, it sounds like. And it's just kind of one of those weird things where a guy gets fired and the team just starts to play better because there's just a little bit of a injection of energy into the building and into the organization. So I could see, this Jaguars team is talented, and I think that's kind of the problem and why Doug Peterson could be finding his way out, because they're 0-4 and they really shouldn't be. So I think there is talent there. This could potentially be the letdown game that you were talking about a minute ago. And I believe it would be the first time the Jaguars have ever beaten the Vikings. I don't think the Jaguars have ever beaten the Vikings. Yeah. So I'll put that down as a loss. Yeah, that could potentially be a loss in kind of a letdown way.
I could see that as well. It does remind me of the 0-5 Falcons showing up and they had just fired Dan Quinn, and then they get that little boost. Or how about the Vegas Raiders last year, where they fire Josh McDaniels and then Antonio Pierce comes in and suddenly they're playing with their hair on fire. The Raiders are bad, but there's something to that where a team kind of gets inspired immediately. I even remember with Indy when they named Jeff Saturday their coach. I think they won a game and they played really well in another one. It's like, oh man, maybe he's the hero they need. And no, he wasn't long term. So if they fire Peterson right before that, be scared. 8-2 going to Tennessee to play maybe Will Levis, maybe Mason Rudolph. You'd rather play Will Levis, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and right now they're up 6-3 on the Dolphins now down in Miami. So that's the Tennessee Titans, surprise, surprise, playing an ugly game full of nothing but field goals. Who would have guessed?
Should have been on a Thursday. Really should have been on a Thursday.
Against the Jaguars. I don't think the Titans are very good. I know they've got some talented guys, and DeAndre Hopkins, one of the best receivers of this last decade. But if Will Levis is still playing quarterback by then, I'd really like the Vikings' chances. I don't even know. We might have talked about this before. I don't even know who their backup is. Who is their backup right now?
For Tennessee, it's Mason Rudolph.
Oh, Mason. Oh, of course, you just mentioned it. My bad. Yeah. Well, then if Will Levis gets benched and it's Mason Rudolph, I still like the Vikings' chances. So I'll put that down as a win.
I do as well. 9-2 going to Soldier Field, where I think people were celebrating a little too early on Caleb Williams the other day after he had a tough game. He has come back and played pretty well the last 2 weeks. They get a win against the Rams November 24th. Sounds like that grass will be slick. Are you picking the Vikings to go to 10-2?
I am not. I'm going to put that down as a loss. It's Soldier Field. Caleb Williams is potentially playing much better football by then. And I got a feeling it could be a little ugly weather-wise, and that could make things tricky. So I'll give the Bears a close victory at Soldier Field there. So that'll drop the Vikings to 9-3.
10-3. It is interesting how much you have to strain to find the losses because of how much better the Vikings have played than everybody else in the NFL, where you're saying, well, yeah, I think they'll lose at Soldier Field, which would have been just a given for us to talk about over so many years. And I could just hear people being like, what the heck's your problem, Manny? They're going to beat the Bears. 10-3 would be a nice start. December 1st against the Arizona Cardinals at home.
I will put that down as a win. Cardinals are talented, but the Vikings having that game at home, I think, will help a lot, and they'll come away with a dub.
11-3 against the Arizona Cardinals. Now, Kirk Cousins' revenge game. This one is a little actually revengey. We've had a lot of that this year. All sorts of connections going on. December 8th against the Falcons, who got a big win against the New Orleans Saints. I am shocked to find out that Derek Carr was hot and then cold. I can't believe it. It's only what he's done for his entire career, all the time. He's not different. December 8th. What do you think?
I will call that a win because I think I think Kirk will still be playing by then. He's starting to kind of pick it up a little bit. But I think Brian Flores is going to have something nasty in store for Kirk Cousins. And it's going to make things really tough for him. So I will put that down as a win.
Okay. To Chicago. Did I give them one too many wins?
I think
Why does this always happen? That is 11-3, right?
That
is
would
the comment
be,
section telling me like
I think that's 10. I think that's 10-3.
Okay, because there are 4 games left. Okay, sorry. I got one ahead, possibly 2. That's 10-3. Now they're facing Chicago. I don't know who I gave them 2 wins against, but Chicago at 10-3. Sorry about that.
I'll put that down as a win at home, Monday Night Football. I think the Vikings will kind of get, feed off of the previous 2 wins and rebound after a tough loss in Soldier Field and get a little revenge on the Bears and split that series.
Okay, now 11-3, which I may have declared them twice before, but we corrected that. Out to Seattle at 11-3. Could be a tough matchup.
Yeah, a very tough place to play. I think Seattle is pretty good. Looks like they're getting ready to fall down 14-0 in Detroit right now, but I think the Seahawks are really good. It's a tough place to play, tough crowd. I'll put that down as a loss.
Okay, so 11-4 going into the final 2 weeks, home against Green Bay and at the Detroit Lions. How do these 2 contests match up? And what is the Vikings' final record? Is it 13-4? Is it 12-5? Is it 11-6?
I will put this down as a split of the last 2 games, winning at home against Green Bay and sweeping that season series, and then losing on the road in the finale, which could be for the division at that point, and the Lions then completing the season sweep. So I have the Vikings at 12-5.
Okay, wow. A 12-5 season would put them right in that range of a team that can compete for a Super Bowl. But I want to run through comments with you here, Manny, and get people's reactions to you picking them 12-5. Other questions. I also asked people before you came on, where should Manny have this? And you end up with 12. So let's get to the questions here. From Jake, I wonder how much KOC can learn and is willing to adapt. when encountering adversity, thinking about the play calling and stalled turnover-laden drives. This is a difficult one for me, Manny, because KOC after the game said he's going to be aggressive to show he believes in his players. And I respect that, but I also think they know by now, and he should really follow along with the best possible ways to win the game, which sometimes is going to have to lean towards safe and not as aggressive with passing and not as trusting of his quarterback. Act like he's Case Keenum, but let him make his Sam Bradford throws from time to time with his arm talent. I think that the whole general feel for a game has always been a KOC criticism. That's just how I've felt since he got here.
Yeah, no, I agree. And something that you and Dane talked about after the game yesterday was, I think it was like you guys mentioned situational play calling, where, we know like, it goes without saying, like, it's for the most part in this league in 2024, you have to have a good passing offense to be successful, to have a good offense, to be, in contention to win championships and things like that. But you also have to kind of know when the best option is to just keep it simple and not get cute. And it felt like at times yesterday, and we've seen this in the past with KOC in the previous 2 seasons, where they have just tried to get a little bit too cute because, as you have said many times, KOC likes to hit that pass button on the gamepad. Often, it's like hitting that X button on the PlayStation controllers, the pass button, just pass, 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 pass. And him being a former quarterback himself, like, I get it. And coming from, Sean McVay's offense in Los Angeles, I get it. But in situations like what we've talked about with yesterday, when it's 3rd and 1, 2nd and 1, you don't need to force the ball down the field in situations like that. When you have the running back that you have now, and Aaron Jones, who's been terrific these first 4 games of the season, just turn around, hand the ball off to him, keep it simple, get the first down, and then you can go back to maybe hitting your pass button a few more times. But, make the smart decision, make the decision that kind of makes the most sense in that moment. And then I think things will be fine. I mean, I go back to that 3rd and 1 before halftime. You just turn around and hand the ball off to Aaron Jones, get the first down. You still have the ball. The clock is still running. And if you end up getting further down and kicking a field goal right before halftime, you're up 31-0 in the game. The second half of the game is completely different. So those little things are the things that we've got to see KOC, I think, really improve on.
So it doesn't also have to be, when we talk about, well, hey, just run the ball, it doesn't have to be an actual run every time. It can also be safe passing.
Yes.
I think about how many passes Tom Brady threw to like James White and Danny Woodhead, because a little swing pass to Ty Chandler. I really wanted to see the swing pass to Ty Chandler. This dude will not get caught for a loss in the backfield. Take a snap out of the shotgun, have that dude swing out, get him the football, get him 6 yards, keep that whole thing churning. How about, now I will say, when they get TJ Hawkinson back, this may be a little bit better. But I even want to see Justin Jefferson be the clock killer as well, where line him up in the slot, run a little in and out pattern while they're playing 50 yards off him because they're terrified of a deep pass, 5 yards, 7 yards. And you know who's not going to be mad about that? Justin Jefferson. And you know who's going to catch the ball? Justin Jefferson. He's going to get yards after catch at times. They almost give him no opportunities to get yards after catch. He's entirely got to be 20 yards down the field for big plays. This is something about the offense that frustrated me in the past, was that you're always asking it to be hard. And Darnold has come through so many times, but sometimes you can ask it to be easy. Just a little bubble, a little quick pass to Jefferson or Addison. Get those guys with the football in their hands. Let them make a play. That was something that just seemed too much, where it was dropped straight back. Look, wait, go through progressions, and then sack or incompletion. That's not something they need. So that, don't mean to over harp on it, but I think to your point that there is going to be, as we ramp up now from, hey, it's good that they're fun, to, oh, actually we should expect them to win, that we are a little more putting this under a microscope of how this went down yesterday. Is the Faithful says they'll lose games at some point. Interesting to see how they respond because right now they're beating teams into the ground. I think that is a good point that the potential response after a loss, if they do go to Jacksonville and lose, how does that throw this team off? I think they have enough veteran players where it shouldn't be a massive problem, but it's really about the quarterback. I think when we're talking about that, it's just really about, can Sam Darnold stay confident, but also not try to do too much? If he has a bad game, is he going to try to get the bad game back in the next game by taking too many risks? Because I think that in this game against the Packers, there was a little bit of the shaky Sam Darnold that I expected him to look like every week. And it was only this week that he actually looked like, outside of maybe one play against Houston. But this was the week where I went, ooh, is he gonna, okay. And he ends up walking out of there with a win, but there was a little more of that risky Sam Darnold.
Yeah, and it's interesting because obviously, they're going to lose a game at some point, and it'll be, fascinating to kind of watch how they respond to that. But I'm even more interested, Matthew, in seeing how they respond to yesterday's game because of what we just talked about with the second half not being very good for them, and things got very interesting in the end. And also, let's keep in mind, I mean, the Vikings won that game by 2 points yesterday. It got really close at the end. Also, keep in mind the Packers missed 2 field goals in that game as well.
Yep.
And if they make one of those 2 field goals, you could be actually talking about a loss here, and them being 3-1. So I'll be curious to see how they respond to not having a very good second half and almost kind of letting this game slip away after having a big lead. If they kind of clean up some of the things that they maybe struggled with in the second half yesterday, and how prepared they are and ready to go and sort of shake off the second half yesterday, going into that Jets game, I think will be really fascinating to watch.
Aaron says, can I provide an update on Gabriel Murphy? I wish that I could, my friend, but there wasn't really much one from Kevin O'Connell today. So I do not have an update on that. I mean, it was kind of, yeah, well, we got a timeline for him and not going to tell you what it is. I'm not really sure. That's been mysterious for the whole time, where he came into camp, he was good, and then he got injured, and there hasn't been any real update on what the injury is or why he has been out for as long as he is. And when it happens in training camp, they don't have to put on an injury report. So I can't even really tell you what happened or how long he's going to be out. But he wasn't going to be an impact player on this team. It's really about the future. Let's see. Tang says Jets are frauds and that offensive line is going to get destroyed by Flores. Lions will be tough, but after that, it's an easy stroll through bad teams. It's never an easy stroll through anything when we're talking about the NFL, as we saw from 2016. And for the OGs, was it 03 was the year where Josh McCown did his thing at the end? So it's never easy in the NFL, but I do think that the Jets are not good, and there seems to be issues there, as we may have expected, with the coach and the quarterback, and the Lions will be tough multiple times. Seattle will be difficult. I would not count out. I mean, it's Sean McVay as the coach of the Rams, so we can't just count that team out and say that's easy. They are on the road a little bit more. They're coming off the London thing. You wonder about just keeping the gas pedal down. But I think overall, if you were to give a grade on how difficult the schedule is from here, I might give it like a B minus. It is not an A+ difficulty schedule from here on.
No, it's not. And you brought up the 03 team. That team, the Nathan Poole, Josh McCown play at the end, that team lost to the 4 worst teams in the league record-wise. The Cardinals at the end, the Giants, the Chargers, and Raiders. All 4 of those teams, I believe, finished 4-12 for the 4 worst records in the league. And the Vikings finished 9-7. Like, that probably should have been an 11-win team that, won the division and made the playoffs. So you can never really look ahead and say, of course, I just picked them to win a bunch of these games, but none of these games are guaranteed. I mean, we just talked about potentially going down to Jacksonville, and that could potentially be a letdown game. The Rams could be a letdown game. I mean, we'll see how things kind of play out. Sean McVay's still a very good coach. I've been bagging on Will Levis, but that's, the way the Titans play, they play ugly games. And sometimes when you get into ugly games against a team that still has a pretty good defense, they can make things challenging for you, make things ugly. You kind of look at what the Broncos did to the Jets yesterday, where the Broncos are not a very good team, not very good offensively, but their defense is good enough to just kind of make things nasty and sloppy. And then you find yourself losing 10-9 like the Jets did yesterday. So it's very possible for those types of games to happen in Jacksonville, in Tennessee. We always talk about how tricky Soldier Field can get. That's certainly a game that could get. We could see something like that. So you're going to have to be ready to play against no matter who you're going up against, even if these teams are not very good record wise.
Yeah, I mean, even when we go back to other years where they've had meltdowns or they've lost games they shouldn't have. I mean, last year, they're playing Russell Wilson. He's not very good with Denver. There's that big story that they wanted to have Russell Wilson not play anymore so they wouldn't have to pay him. And then they're winning the game. Alexander Madison fumbles and it all just kind of falls apart. And even in Cincinnati, weren't they up like 21-6? And then all of a sudden, they come back. They make a couple of plays. Cincinnati's playing Jake Browning. They didn't make the playoffs in the National Football League. I don't know if you ever heard this before, Manny. It is a week-to-week type of league. So if I could fit in as many cliches as possible, I'm not sure they could count their chickens before they hatch when it comes to the rest of this schedule. So I don't want to say that it's a walk in the park, but what you said, 12 wins, the door is open and the bar is set. And part of that is the schedule. Adam asks, isn't it true that PFF has had a lot of staff turnover and drama recently? I feel like grading Byron Murphy higher than Gilmore was weird, and other issues too. So the staff turnover is mostly not on the side of the people who do the grading. So that shouldn't have much of an impact. It's more on the content side of things and some of their data scientists who use the grades to create studies and stuff like that. One of them is working in the NFL presently. So they have had some key people leave, but it shouldn't impact how those grades are done and delivered to all of the NFL teams each week. As far as Byron Murphy, that's another one where sometimes the grade takes an explanation. Byron Murphy had a tough game at times and then made two spectacular, enormous plays for them. And Stephon Gilmore was running out there for the love of the game. They didn't want anything to do with Stephon Gilmore. Now, which one of those things is more valuable? Who's the better player? I mean, of course, Gilmore is the better player. And Murphy got picked on a few times and missed a couple tackles, but the punch out is so massive. The interception is so massive. We ran into this with Anthony Harris and Harrison Smith a few years ago, where Harris had some splash plays and it upped his grade. It didn't necessarily mean that Harris was a better player than Harrison Smith. And all of it, it's very tricky to grade every play in the NFL. And I think if we understand the shortcomings, then we can, I think, use those grades effectively. If you just want the answer to how everyone played in every single game with no context, well, I mean, you watch the game and then you go back and look and you might say, you know what? I actually didn't realize that this guy missed a couple of tackles, or I thought Metellus had a worse game than he had. And I'm sure I'll go back and look at it and realize that it was better because of the PFF grade. So I like to compare and contrast for what they saw. Let's see. George says if KOC doesn't get away from being stubborn and develop a short yardage run scheme, we will lose a game because of this. I hold my breath with every 1 or 2 yard to go versus 3rd and 6. It is true. And I thought yesterday, you talk about getting cute, a pitch to the outside with Aaron Jones. When Christian Darrisaw plays for your team, you just put it right behind him and Blake Brandel. Garrett Bradbury had a good game yesterday. And then the end around thing, which worked, and it worked for Addison, and it felt like it might have been a little predictable at that time. I mean, yes, this has been a problem the whole time he's been here, is when it's 2nd and 1 or 3rd and 1. It's like, what do we do here? What do we do here? There's no tush push. And then when they tried the tush push, it was the stupidest possible person pushing behind the tush that it cost them the game in Cincinnati. I mean, I agree with that. I think that there does have to be a very distinct, this is how we are going to get those yards. And Aaron Jones running that way, straightforward, seems like the best option to me.
Keep it simple. Stop trying to be too cute. It just seems like every time KOC tries to get a little bit too cute, it kind of backfires and it makes things more complicated than it needs to be. We talked about just handing the ball off straightforward to get a yard because all you need is a yard. And then you've got a whole new set of downs to work with. Simple screen passes. You've got a running back who's very good at catching and turning and running on screen passes. And those are simple throws for your quarterback to make. Just keep it simple. Don't try to get too cute. Occasionally, yeah, you want to get fancy to try and catch the defense off guard, but when it's when the ultimate result that you want is very simple, it kind of makes the most sense to just keep things as simple as possible.
I agree. Marcus says PFF grades Love 68.8 and Darnold 45. They both had 3 turnover worthy plays. Make it make sense. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to spend the whole time on just trying to explain a single PFF grade. They can do that for you. But as far as Jordan Love goes, he had some pretty bad plays. And he also had, gosh, I don't know, 6 or 7 unbelievable plays. And Sam Darnold only had one big time throw. It was the throw to Jefferson in the end zone, and a big time throw where you escape the pocket and fling it 30 yards down the field to a guy in traffic and make a play is going to get a higher grade on big time throws than throwing to a wide open Jordan Addison in the end zone. It is hard to, it's always been for these PFF grades, hard to explain that they are not giving Sam Darnold almost any credit for the Addison touchdown because there's no one around him and it's an easy throw. That is not to say it's not important or it wasn't a great play, but it's that the whole standard is kind of, could anyone do it? Was this great? Was it exceptional? And if you have more exceptional plays, you're going to get a slightly higher grade. I also am just going to keep saying it. The hardest position by far, it's not even close to grade, is quarterback. It will never be a perfect or an easy thing to do, but the correlation is high between PFF grades and actual winning. That the more often you get higher grades from the quarterback position, the higher the grade goes, the better your chances are to win the game. People have studied this. So yesterday, I think, was one of those kind of strange exceptions where the turnovers, because the way the game played out, just did not cost Sam Darnold. But normally, if you throw it right into the hands of the cornerback, you just can't say that enough. Like, he threw it right to him. And what is PFF supposed to do about that? One of his touchdowns is a 2-yard pass to Josh Oliver. I mean, you could have done that with anyone. That's how they're grading it. That's not me saying that he had a bad game. It's just, or that it deserves to be that low. It's just, that's how the system works. So we have to understand that when we rant about it. But give me your opinion, Manny, though. How would you have graded on like an A to F scale what Sam Darnold did yesterday?
I thought it was a solid B. I mean, I thought he made some good plays, some good throws. I think the drive late in the game when the Packers had made things really close and just some of the throws he made to Jefferson and just executing in moments when they really needed it because they were kind of reeling a little bit. The Packers had come storming back in the game, and those are high pressure situations, and it's a lot harder to execute in those types of situations. So I think Darnold gets a lot of credit for that, but the interception when he had a couple of other guys open and you're trying to force the ball to Aaron Jones because you're trying to get him in the end zone so he can do his Lambeau leap that he was talking about earlier in the week. It's just kind of like, again, it's like we talk about, don't do that. Don't do that, Sam. Just don't do that. Again, keep it simple. Sometimes the best play to make is just the one that's right there. And the easy play to make. I mean, just sometimes you just got to lay the ball up instead of trying to do a between the legs dunk, which we all love seeing. But sometimes a simple play, they're both are worth 2 points. You know what I mean? In the case of basketball. So I think that's kind of where I have him as like a B or a B plus, because I thought he made some good plays. Again, the late drive was good, but then there's others plays where it's like, okay, Sam, don't do that. Don't do that. Keep it simple.
And the strip sack is something
Yeah.
that, look, if that happened to Kirk Cousins, you guys know what I would have said after the game. I would have
Yep.
said, that's bad. That's on you. You can't have that happen at that point. You cannot get strip sacked. Anything can happen. You could throw it up in the air as high as you possibly can over the stadium and let it fall to the ground. Or you could do anything except for get strip sacked and give them the ball and an easy score like that. That was a major reason we're talking about the defense. Wow, they gave up this many yards and they played too much prevent, didn't blitz enough, XYZ. Well, what are they supposed to do when it's 1st and 10 at the 20-yard line or whatever it was? It might have even been better than that. And 2 plays later, they're scoring. Well, there's nothing you could do at that point if you're the defense, and that was on the quarterback. So he does deserve to get downgraded for that, but it's also balanced out by the biggest situation where they needed a drive to win. They found a way to do it, and he was the leader of that. So I agree with you. I think Dane said maybe B plus. I was kind of in that range yesterday, but we can all use our brains with these PFF stats and stuff. Like, what does it tell us that he had a bad grade? It tells us that turnover worthy plays are very bad, and that these grades are often tied to the math as well. And I'm sure that if you have 3 turnover worthy plays, you normally don't win a football game, just normally, because he only had 2 coming into that game. So it kind of tells you a lot about that's scary. And if he does that in the worst situations and they're not up 28 points, that will cost them. Marcus says Darnold revenge game feels like a trap game. Ooh, that sounds like we should be Stephen A and Shannon, and we should be yelling, "This trap game is proliferous," or something like that, at each other. And you can do a Shannon impression if you want. Just don't do an impression of his Instagram. That's not what I need
let's
from
hope
you.
Not. I'll just probably just tell a story about something that my grandma told me when I was very young. Something like that.
Yeah, Shannon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to make a fun of his. He kind of has always had that little bit of a lisp there, but real quick shout out to Shannon Sharp though. The greatest Hall of Fame speech I've ever seen. So if you haven't seen it, go check that out. But to your point,
put his brother in the Hall of Fame. Damn it!
I know. Come on.
I know he's
and
a
that's
Packer,
a big
but
part of his
put
speech,
him in the Hall of Fame, man.
As a side note, revenge game or trap game? Well, what would you prefer there out of the cliche ways that we label football games?
I would say trap game, just because the Jets aren't playing well right now, and the thought is that the Vikings should kind of handle business in this game. But revenge game for Sam Darnold. I mean, how many people are still with the Jets since Sam Darnold left? I mean, the coach is different. There might be a few players that are still there from when he was with the Jets, but it feels like a completely different team now. I know, probably a lot of some similar front office people. The ownership is obviously still the same, but I don't know. I probably lean more towards trap game than revenge game.
I 100% agree. It's just been too long. If they had just let him go and then he was doing this, then it is very much revenge. This one is more trappy because they just lost to the Broncos and their quarterback threw 60 yards. If you lose to a team whose quarterback threw for 60 yards, you're going to come out like you got a bee in your bonnet. The New York Jets are going to be very upset, I think, headed to London. And boy, nobody can tell you better what it's like to have a bee in your bonnet than me. You get one of those, well, you don't want that. So they are going to be piping hot little potatoes when the Vikings go up against them after such a bad performance. But it is very trappy because I think everyone looks at the Jets rightfully and says they're just not that good, and the Vikings should beat them. Drew says Green Bay and Detroit are dangerous. 2016 Vikings were 5-0 before they knew it, 5-4. Stay humble. Luckily, you and I don't have to stay humble, and you certainly don't when you're picking the team. Not at all. You're Dion dancing as you pick them to 12 wins. But let's just stop and do the 2016 thing. I just don't see any correlation. Talk about being a long time ago. Different coach, very different offensive line situation. I think that the coach really losing his marbles played a big role in that. Calling out the offensive line, calling them soft, the injuries that they had. I just don't see this as being all that similar, Manny.
I don't either. And, it's one of those things where, and the funny thing is I think that year, the bye week was week after the right after the 5-0 start. It was week
It
6.
was. Yep.
And it's the same situation here where if they win on Sunday, then they're 5-0 going into the bye week. Um, I'm with you. I don't really see a whole lot of similarities. I mean, Mike Zimmer calling his offensive line soft after the first loss of the season. They go into Philadelphia out of the bye week. They don't play very well. I think did Jake Long get hurt in that game? I think
Later on, later in the season against Washington, they had a
okay,
chance to win. Blair Walsh missed a field goal. They also don't have field goal kicker drama. They haven't yet
right.
fired a coordinator. I mean, the number of things that had to happen, that sort of tells you how bad it has to go to start like this and end up like that. Thielen fumbled a punt in a game that Mike Zimmer wasn't coaching because of his eyeball. Remember that they should
Yep.
have. And really, there was a penalty there. They should have, or a penalty that wasn't called. Bradford was hit in the face on a 2-point conversion. I mean, so much bad stuff happened. And I'm not saying it can't still happen because this is the Vikings, but it was cataclysmic to get to that point. There was the Adrian Peterson drama.
Yep.
I mean, it had to be absolutely wild. And I think they just have a coach who can steer the ship better.
You don't have TJ Clemmings playing left tackle. You have Christian Darrisaw, which that helps a ton. That is a major, 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 like 100-degree difference there. I just think that, you have a head coach, I would think, that is not going to like light into his team and call them soft if they lose to Detroit out of the bye. I don't think you're going to have a lot of things like that. So I think that this team is better equipped and circumstantially in a better place to where I can't imagine a meltdown really happening unless, knock on wood, we see them just get ravaged by injuries and just nobody's healthy. And then it could get really challenging. But other than that, if everybody can stay healthy for the most part, I don't see a meltdown like we saw 8 years ago.
And even when you think about it from that perspective, their backup left tackle is David Quessenberry, who is okay and has done good every time he comes in. Their backup guard is Dalton Reisner, who has played in the NFL for a long time as a starter and been pretty good. They had Ivan Pace injured, and Kamu Grugier-Hill turns into freaking Luke Kuechly for the last 2 weeks. He's making plays. He said that he kind of took it upon himself to read the route combination and just jump the play yesterday. So you got a backup linebacker out there just going rogue and picking off passes. I mean, they have a lot of depth on this team, except that one position, and that is the cornerback position. Stephon Gilmore's health, I think, is super vital to this
Huge.
team retaining their success. And there's always the quarterback thing. If Sam Darnold, when he got twisted a little bit on that scramble, again, run the ball. When he got twisted up on that scramble, it's like, no. So that's kind of 2 straight weeks where, if he's going to play a little bit wonky in the pocket, hold on to the ball a little bit too long, scramble a little bit too dangerously, that, there has been injuries before with him. But aside from that, it is hard to see with this schedule and these players some sort of catastrophe, very much knocking on whatever fake wood this desk in front of me is made of. Because nobody wants that. Nobody wants 2016 again. My hairline when I got here was decent. It's not anymore. And I wear hats on the show because of 2016. That was exhausting. First name, last name says the number 1 seed would be so valuable this season. Feels like home field advantage has been huge for the way this team is built. I totally agree. I mean, that's too far down the road for me, but the US Bank Stadium thing is back, Manny.
100%. And that's why, like, now you're in a position where, if you can get to 12, maybe 13 wins, if you can kind of avoid like a super letdown loss, like what I kind of picked with like Jacksonville, you can win this division, get one of those top seeds, get into that sort of that top 3 range, maybe like a number 2 seed or something like that. See how like things go with San Francisco the rest of the year. But if you can get at least at the very least one home playoff game, it's gonna make a huge, huge, huge difference. You don't want to have to go on the road to maybe have to go to Detroit for like a second week in a row, after, maybe losing to them in week 7 or week 18. I think getting a home game, winning a division is you just can't really put a price on it.
I like the back-to-back of these two comments. Drew says, I'm predicting someone in the NFC North going to the Super Bowl. And Jim
Mm.
says, 13 games left. No way I'm in Super Bowl discussion. Great juxtaposition there with you two. Let's talk about the Super Bowl, Manny. Here's how I want to talk about the Super Bowl. The Vikings are going. No, that's not the way I want to talk about it. The way I want to talk about it is, although at 28-0, I was looking, or 28-0, I was like, are you guys seeing this? What the
Yeah.
heck is going on here? Is this the best team that's ever played football? And then I was like, okay, not quite in the second half. Here's what I want from you though. I'm going to give you, not really, but $1,000 to gamble with. Okay. And here's your challenge. You got to spend the $1,000 on teams to win the Super Bowl, not 1,000 on one team, but you got to tell me how you would distribute your money. The entire NFL, you're picking teams to win the Super Bowl. How many dollars? You following with this math? I know you hate
Mhm.
math, but it's too bad because I pay you for the show. So this is what's happening. You're taking 1,000 fake dollars and you're putting your $1,000 on teams to win the Super Bowl. How much money and on whomst are you putting your dollars?
Okay, so I'm gonna put $250 on the Kansas City Chiefs.
Makes sense?
I'm going to put I put $100 on the Baltimore Ravens.
Okay.
I think they found their groove now the last couple of
Mm-hmm.
games. All right, so now I've got 650 left to figure out.
You
I still
picking 250 was just like hell for your math
I
for the
know.
rest of this. I just want to point that out.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
okay, let me back up. I'll put 300 on the Chiefs.
That'll make it easier for you. 300
Yep.
on the Chiefs, 100 on Baltimore. Who
All
else
right.
do you want to put your money on?
I'll put my money on Houston. I'll put $50 on Houston.
Okay.
I think they bounced back pretty well yesterday. I'll put another 50 on Buffalo.
Okay. Makes sense.
I will put I'm trying to find an NFC team. I'll put another 50 on San Francisco.
Okay.
I should probably put a little more on San Francisco, but they're banged up right now.
Have
All
you
right, so
lost track of
that's
how much you have? You have $500 still to work with here, I think, right? Because you had 300 on Kansas City, Baltimore, and then 50 on Houston, 50 on Buffalo.
yep, that's fine. I've got 500 left to work with. Okay.
I feel like you've
I'll
really played this safely with the dollars.
Yeah, I
You're trying
have.
to spread out with a lot of different teams here. The whole idea, Manny, is how much out of this 1,000 are you putting on the Vikings? I'm not sure if you've caught on to that. That's what we're
I
getting at
know.
here.
I know. Uh I'll tell you what. I'll put I'll go 100. So I put 100 on Baltimore, right?
Mhm.
I'll put 100 on San Francisco, so we'll add another 50 to that. I'll put I'll put 50 on the Vikings.
Okay. Are you putting 100 on Detroit?
I'll put 100 on Detroit.
How about Seattle as they're playing really well here? Is Seattle going to be a better 4-0 team if they win tonight? What's going on? Are they losing?
No, yeah, they're losing. It's 21-7 Lions.
Oh, okay. Well, if
So I
Seattle's
would
3-1, then do they get the same? Are they as
I'll put
good
them in
as
the
the Vikings?
same I put them in the same spot as the Vikings. So I'll put
Okay.
50 on them as well.
The thing about the NFC is,
NFC's
I
hard,
mean,
man.
Tampa Bay is 3-1, so that's pretty good. But when you go through the NFC and you go, well, who belongs in the odds discussion in the same ballpark as the Vikings, which was supposed to be what that exercise was trying to do?
I know.
it Seattle, I think you could say it. Detroit, you could say it. Green Bay, they're clearly a little bit ahead of.
Yeah, it's
When
Green Bay.
Love is healthy at the end of the season, maybe it's different. And I would put them ahead of anyone in the South. I'd ahead of Arizona, ahead of the Rams. Washington is suddenly very interesting, but ahead of Dallas, ahead of Philadelphia. There's not that many teams that you'd be putting money on to go to the Super Bowl ahead of the Vikings at this point at 4-0. And
Yeah.
to say that doesn't sound like I'm a nut job.
Yeah, I can't put anybody in the South or anybody in the NFC East ahead of the Vikings right now. I mean, that's 8 teams right there just in the NFC that I would give the Vikings better chances, better odds of getting to the Super Bowl. I don't like anybody in the East. I mean, Washington's a little bit of a surprise, but I think they'll probably come back to earth a little bit. You know, Jaden Daniels is playing well. He's off to a nice start, but and Dallas and Philly just seem like they both just seem like kind of a mess right now. The Eagles especially seem like just a complete dumpster fire. That's another team that might be firing their coach soon if things don't get back on track for them. Yeah, and then after that, I like, I think the Packers deserve a lot of love. But after that, it just the NFC is really it's almost like a drop off kind of after, after you talk about like Green Bay. Um, yeah, it just seems like a pretty significant drop off with the rest of the conference.
Yeah, I think it's San Francisco, Detroit, Vikings
Yeah.
and Seattle belong in their own tier. And
Hmm.
then the next level down, I wouldn't be shocked if Dallas got into a rhythm eventually, but they might just not be that good. And then, I mean, teams fall off so quickly. Like suddenly, just Philadelphia is not that great anymore. They're more
Right.
like a 500 team all of a sudden because that's how it works in football sometimes. Marcus says reasonable to start talking about Darnold's floor being higher. While he might not be a Hall of Famer, there will be regressions. Minimum expectations have come up. Where the floor can be prevented is because of all the things in the foundation. To use the housing analogy, if you have a strong foundation made up of the offensive tackles, the receivers, the coaching, the defense, then the floor does go higher. I think that actually the way to use the PFF grade from yesterday is to say that a guy had 3 turnover worthy plays and graded a 45 and had so many open receivers and good performances around him that they still won the game on the road at Lambeau. That really says something about the team that you have around this quarterback, because normally if you do have 3 turnovers as an offense and you do make that many mistakes, then and one of them was Naylor, obviously, that led to the touchdown. If you do have that many mistakes, then gosh, I didn't even think of that for the defense. We were kind of blaming them, but 2 of the touchdowns, they started drives right at the goal line. I didn't even think of that
Yeah.
yesterday when we were talking about it. We should have given them a little more credit, I think. But the point just being, if you can screw up like that and still have enough open receivers, running game, screen game, play action, all those things for your quarterback to rest on, then his floor does go a lot higher.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, you said it perfectly. It's the foundation around him, it's the infrastructure, it's, the offensive minded head coach, although he kind of can tend to be a little too aggressive at times when he doesn't need to be. But I think the overall environment, the overall setup, I think can allow for things to kind of be cleaned up a little bit. And you have a defense that's very quality and can force turnovers. The defense gave up a lot of yards yesterday, but they forced some turnovers in big moments, which really helped them hang on to the win. And I think all of that stuff kind of goes hand in hand. It goes back to like the complementary football stuff that we talk about with this team of like, it's the offense helps the defense, helps the offense, helps the defense, helps the offense.
Right, right.
You know what I mean? It's like it's just like everything kind of fits together perfectly. And if something goes wrong on one side of the ball, the other side has the ability to sort of pick things up. When the defense got gashed a little bit in the second half, the offense came through with a big drive to kind of, keep the Packers at bay and hold on to the victory. So it's all about like what these two sides of the ball and special teams too, having a kicker that doesn't miss kicks, that's a big deal. All of that stuff kind of goes hand in hand, and I don't want to pick on the previous quarterback again, but there were just times where if Kirk had the type of game that Sam Darnold had yesterday, the Vikings at times couldn't overcome it because the defense wasn't good enough, and then they ended up losing those games. So I think just the way they have things set up right now for Sam Darnold, I think is working really well, and I can't imagine that it's going to change too much going forward, provided that everybody can kind of stay healthy.
This does speak to what I said earlier about being fair and consistent to the quarterback performance. And especially now that we've raised the bar, we have to reevaluate. One of the reasons we were so critical about Kirk is the bar was always at being a Super Bowl contender. Now that it's there for this team, I think we could say that if Kirk played the same way as yesterday and they were up 28 points and the final score was by 2, we would have said, Kirk, how about we don't throw the pick? How about we don't get the strip sack? How about check one down and get a first down or complete a pass and don't throw a hospital ball? Like, we would have had some of the same criticisms. And that just kind of circles back to the Darnold when looked through the lens of, is this sort of championship football? Definitely had his moments of that, and also had his moments where you probably can't continue to mess around and find out like he did a few times in that game. Pamela says, I far prefer the Sam Darnold experience more to the Kirk Cousins experience. There's a part of that is, well, it's fun because of the guy ripping throws. I mean, that's just, you can't, it doesn't get old. How fast the football comes out of his hands and all that. How likable Sam Darnold is, just in terms of what the guy went through to be here and now to have his moment. But I think another part of it is that what we were just talking about, when you saw the same quarterback who was very good come short of expectations so many times, it just wore thin. And the first impression was doing exactly that in 2018. And it just ran out of gas, and it got some life pumped into it in 2022, but then immediately disappointed everyone in the playoffs. With Darnold, I still feel like, Manny, even if I'm upping the expectations to 12 wins and we're setting a new bar for this team, I still think that you can ride the Darnold roller coaster and just sort of go with the let's see what happens season. It's different at 4-0, but also knowing that this team isn't all in on this year. And if they don't win, that the results are, you're going to fall off the edge of a cliff like 2019 to 2020. Knowing that that backdrop is there, that this team has a future and good leadership and coaching, does make this entire experience different.
Yeah, and I think just the fact that it is just a different experience now, I think is what adds to the overall sort of like intrigue and how this is going to play out, because the Kirk thing just got it was, I mean, it was frustrating, I think, for people like you and I for pretty much the entire 6-year run. I think, but I think it was also just by the time we got to like year 4 or 5, and then like last year, it just started to get stale. We were just kind of seeing the same things. We were talking about the same things and the same problems. You know, Kirk's salary, the offensive line, the defense isn't good enough. We were just talking about and arguing with people on the internet about the same things over and over and over. And now it's a different guy. He's a different quarterback. You know, maybe a little bit more physically talented than what we saw with Kirk Cousins. Um, and it's fresh, it's new. The defense is really good now and hasn't been this good in quite some time. It's just a little bit more interesting. You know, it's a little bit more fascinating to just kind of see, to just say, okay, well, let's see how this plays out. And now, because they've gotten off to this 4-0 start, now it's like it's interesting and it's exciting, because it's like, well, hey, maybe this team is better than what we even initially thought. Now let's really see how this plays out. Let's not just see if they can, you know, maybe contend for a playoff spot, but let's see if they can win this division and maybe make some noise in the playoffs. And if they do, that'll be really exciting.
Okay, we're going to do another show on Thursday. I'm going to keep chatting with everyone, so keep leaving your comments and I'll speed up and catch up a little bit to some of them. But I want to know, before you go, Manny, what was the other most interesting thing to you, of course, outside of the Vikings for this weekend? What popped to you the most? What result caught your eye from this weekend's collection of football games?
I don't know if this should be viewed as a surprise necessarily, but I think it's just something that really stood out and just impressed me. It's the just the way the Kansas City Chiefs continue to just win football games. It's, you've got the best quarterback on the planet, and they're still finding ways to win games because, you know, he is obviously that great, but he's not even really like playing that great right now. and their defense is really good. Now we'll see how things go. It looks like they're probably losing Rashee Rice for the season. That could kind of affect things offensively for them, but just the way that they fall down 10-0 yesterday on the road in LA, although, playing in LA is not really a true road game for any road team that goes in there. But, they fall down 10-0 in the first quarter, and their defense just shuts the Chargers down the rest of the way. And the Chiefs just find a way to just make enough plays. Mahomes makes enough throws, gets enough completions to Kelsey, and they just find ways to win. It just really stood out to me. It's just like, this team is still, if they're going to win a third Super Bowl in a row, it's not going to surprise me. It's not going to surprise anybody. I know some people may have their doubts. I kind of have my doubts too, but like it was just really, really impressive for them to do that. And it just, I think, further solidified that, yeah, they're still here. We're talking about the Vikings and how good things have gone with them. And, Pittsburgh's off to a nice start, although they lost yesterday. The Kansas City Chiefs are still there, man, and they are still going to be a force to be reckoned with. And even when you kind of make things difficult for Patrick Mahomes, they still just find ways. And that was just that really stood out to me yesterday. It was impressive.
Yeah, I'll give you one before you go. After last week, I was saying about Buffalo. Well, I guess I was wrong that maybe Josh Allen can just throw to a bunch of randos and they'll be okay. And then they played a real team in Baltimore, and all of a sudden it was not the same without Mr. Stephon Diggs. So that is going to be a thing to watch going forward, is can the Bills, when they face good teams, actually go toe-to-toe without having a true number one wide receiver to lean upon, because they could not in that game. And Baltimore, they're just, like you said, a team that they're always going to be there. They lose the first couple of games. The sky is falling. Wait a minute. Let's beat two really good teams back to back. And then Baltimore is back. And this is also why, and maybe give KOC an extension. When you get a good coach, you stick with that coach for a long time. That's what Baltimore has done through kind of thick and thin there. Manny, Thursday night, we will preview Vikings and Jets, and we will hear your list of your favorite New York Jets of all time, which I am very, very interested in. So thank you for your time, sir, and I will talk to you again very soon.
Sounds good. Football. See you guys.
Manny Hill. I haven't asked Manny if we're going to the Lynx game on Tuesday. I'm hosting on WCCO radio on Tuesday, by the way. If any of you enjoy your AM radio, I will be on it from 6 to 8 on Tuesday evening. So if you want to tune into that. All right. Let me get back to your comments here. Let's see. Oh gosh, says 100% a trap game, if there is such a thing. But I do think different than trap, I believe in the emotional letdown game. I do believe in that one. Out of all the cliche games that we talk about and the types of games, trap less so than emotional letdown. It has been a bit of a run here. I mean, you go and play Houston and there's all those crossovers. It's a big game for Grenard and Cashman, and Diggs is coming back and the crowd goes crazy, and you come out of that and everyone's juiced up. And then you go to Lambeau. It's an emotional game. It's back and forth, or very much forth and then back for the Vikings. And you get to the end of the game. There's a lot of plays. It's a long game. Then you have to get in an airplane, fly across the pond, get your body adjusted. And they're doing it. I think they're flying out Thursday. So they got to get that adjustment really quick. Everybody get ready. You got to play on a field that probably is not ideal for an NFL game, as we've seen several times before, and play a team that still has one of the best quarterbacks of all time, even if he hasn't been playing as well so far this season. That is a potential letdown game because of the circumstances. This is one where if they blow out the Jets, I will say, I don't know what's going to get in this team's way, because it's so hard to do that, to come off of a huge win against Lambeau, go to a foreign country, play under circumstances you're not used to against a good defense for the New York Jets. I think that they still fall under the category of an excellent defense for the New York Jets. And Darnold coming off a game where he was a little more shaky with the turnovers. I think it's a tougher game than we're going to give it credit for, because of what happened to the Jets last week. Let's see. TXYU says, I don't think Aaron Rodgers is the same anymore. If the pass rush gets to him, it's over. He's too old, and Harrison Smith, Gilmore, and Griffin will pick him off. He is not the same. Absolutely not. But the thing about legendary quarterbacks is that they sometimes just find a way. And Aaron Rodgers has done that a handful of times so far this season where they aren't playing the best football. It's not beautiful or magical. And then suddenly Aaron Rodgers makes a throw that reminds you that he has one of the greatest arms ever attached to a human being. And that's what the Vikings have to be concerned about, because if you're playing in a game that is 10-9, like the Jets were just playing in, you're playing in this back and forth, gritty, grinded out, teams making mistakes, sliding all over the place, going back and forth in an ugly one. The other team has Rodgers, and you got to be concerned about that. So this is the type of game that I feel like the Jets don't mind playing in, where it is maybe a field that is not ideal. That could help them a little bit. They do have a cornerback that is capable of playing probably better against Justin Jefferson than anybody else on earth in Sauce Gardner. They have a good defensive mind in Robert Saleh, who has beaten the Minnesota Vikings before. If you remember 2019, this is not one to say auto win, put that down as a W, move on to the next one, because of the circumstances that are surrounding it. Phil says, give Kwesi his flowers. Well, for the entire offseason, and maybe we'll do some of this at some point because it is the quarter mark of the year-ish. Maybe this is a story or an angle to do. Would be, where were we right and where were we wrong about the start of the season? Okay, 4-0. Everyone was wrong. I would love to know, based on the Vegas odds and gambling and the fact that they were underdogs in all 4 games, what the implied chances of them being 4-0 were. I would guess it would be 1% or less that they would go 4-0. That doesn't mean there were actual chances the way that they played and the players they have, just as far as the expectation that they would go 4-0. I doubt any gambler out there picked the Vikings every single one of these weeks. So that has been surprising on the bigger picture. But as far as the plan working, has not been a huge surprise to me. The plan of inexpensive quarterback, all sorts of free agent talent, building up the roster, coaching it really well, and having them win football games, that has not been shocking. The competitive rebuild of correcting over a couple of seasons the salary cap situation, not signing a very old and expensive and injured quarterback to a big contract, none of that has been shocking. The players that they went out and got, listening to Brian Flores and going and getting the groceries that are made in the grocery list for Brian Flores, that's a good plan. That's what a good general manager should do. He doesn't have to come up with the ideas on his own. Go get the guys that your coordinators want, that they know are good football players, especially Flores, who's a tremendous evaluator and defense builder. Now, this is the second time he's gone from not very much to a very good defense in a really short period of time. So I think Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and what he has done with the overall direction of the team and the roster has been fantastic. And the fact that they are set up for multiple seasons and have drafted a quarterback who looked really good and then has the potential to take over, or maybe not right away, we don't know, but that's a better position than 60% of the NFL that doesn't know what it's doing in the future with its quarterback. I mean, there's a lot to like with the way that they have managed their way out of the Rick Spielman era, which felt pretty hopeless by the end, to now thinking that the window has opened with this group and that you can keep finding players to fit with your coaches. And Justin Jefferson's going nowhere. TJ Hawkinson's going nowhere. Christian Darrisaw is going nowhere. The foundation of the offense is going to be there for KOC to work with for a long time. And we do have, not all of these guys were drafted by Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, but putting the parts around them is the job for him. So yeah, I think he does deserve a lot of credit. It's also only 4 games, and there's expectations here going forward. Manju says the Vikings are first in offensive and defensive EPA. Can you explain what that means? The fastest way I can explain expected points added is that every situation you're in, 1st and 10 at the 25, 1st and goal, it all has an expectations of what you will produce on a given drive. So if you're at the 25-yard line, what are your odds of scoring any points in that drive if you're on your own 25 versus you're on the goal line? So if you're on the 25, your chances of finishing the drive with a score are not that great. So your expected points is maybe 0.3. But if you're at the goal line, your expected points are 5 because you usually get a touchdown or a field goal. See how that works? So at every situation, then how you perform is you're added to that. So if you get a 50-yard pass from the 25-yard line, your expected points goes up from 0.3, and I'm kind of making up these numbers, but 0.3 to now 3 because you're in field goal range, or 2.5 because you're in field goal range. And the gap between where you just were and where you got to is the expected points added. As far as meaning to that, it is very meaningful how you perform versus your situation. And it has been a very predictive stat in terms of offenses and how they perform in the playoffs. So being at the top, that's really good. That's really good. Okay, you guys are funny. I'm getting to the point where Manny was struggling to decide how many dollars to put on, and Sindrew, $1,000 on the Chiefs. The refs always win is funny. That's funny. Also, the greatest quarterbacks usually win as well. 750 on the Vikings. That seems like that would be too much. I maybe would have gone 100. Manny puts $50 on each team and the rest in his pocket is funny. TXYU, Baker Mayfield has revived his career surprisingly. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to Baker Mayfield, it's just another example of a team that got impatient with their quarterback rather than sticking it out. Think about if Atlanta had, I think, 2 bad years with Matt Ryan in the middle of an amazing career. So did Phillip Rivers. If they just bailed on the guy, then they would have not ended up with, on the other side of that, really good seasons. And it wasn't like in Cleveland, Baker was horrendous. It's that the pressure just ramps up so much that teams make irrational decisions. Baker's bad season, I mean, there were so many injuries, including his own that year, that they were not going to make the playoffs. They weren't going to be good, but it also wasn't the worst that any quarterback played in the NFL. And the surrounding cast, the injuries, they were all problematic, but he was still okay. And they should have just tried to rebuild the rest of the team around him. But the complicating factors is always the contracts with these quarterbacks, is that they create so much pressure to win in a guy's rookie contract. And when you don't, you either have to pay him a lot of money, like Trevor Lawrence, where you're on the fence, but what do? You just have to pay him. And that may end up being a bad decision. So I don't know. That one's one where we can second guess Cleveland, I think, a lot, because he has proven to be pretty good. Also, they had maybe the 20th best offense in the league last year. It wasn't really a championship caliber team. Being a middling quarterback is a tough place to be for any team. If you have a guy who's good enough to get you there, and you guys know all about this, good enough to get you the doorstep of the playoffs of the first round, not good enough, likely, unless it's a great team to try to win the Super Bowl. It's a hard place to be. And that's where Baker puts almost any team. Matt B says 3 teams from the North making the playoffs are the postseason. I think at least 2. I just don't know what to think of Green Bay after what we saw. Green Bay is a talented team. Their quarterback is very talented, but if he's going to be playing with a knee injury all season long, it's not going to be an easy ride for Jordan Love. As you saw early in the game, it was a little bit wonky, but I still think that the overall picture of the Green Bay Packers is good enough to be in the playoffs. Does somebody else compete for those final spots? Because you have Washington, Dallas is in the race, maybe somebody else from the West outside of San Francisco. It's not a great overall NFC this year. If there's a year for the Vikings to do this, it's not a great overall NFC. Matt says, if the Vikings are undefeated at the bye week, do you trade for a defensive tackle or right guard? Limited resources, I know. I don't think they have to be undefeated to do that. They would and should consider it. It's just, are you giving up a first round pick? But Kwesi adofo-mensah came on this show. You can go back and find it on YouTube or in your podcast feed. And we talked about what the Timberwolves did with Rudy Gobert and how the Timberwolves decided the reason they traded for Rudy Gobert and traded way too much was we got to go for it. Anthony Edwards is coming into his prime. You only get so many shots at this. Roll the dice. And that he took on some of that, even in getting Dallas Turner. He could do it again. I mean, this might be a hack when you have the cap space to just every year trade away your pick for an actual player. And they got TJ Hawkinson already out of doing this. Maybe they'll do that again if there's somebody who comes up, a defensive tackle, or, I mean, any kind of pass rusher. Imagine if you could use Van Ginkel on the field with Grenard and somebody else, and Patrick Jones, who's playing really well. That might be an option for them. Even another weapon, you can't have too many. Another cornerback is a position I think of if somebody gets banged up, or just having a better rotation out there and somebody they could sign for the future. Let's see. Kicking it with Saint Swarthy says, that's quite a name. The Vikings are the best team in the NFL, unbelievably talented, two of the best play callers on offense and defense, extremely hard to stop. Yeah, when we go through and we compare the rest of the league in terms of your offensive play caller, your defensive play caller, and then we go position by position. Don't talk about the quarterback, just line, weapons, linebackers, secondary overall. It's hard to find a team that would match up and beat them in a lot of those positions. Jeffrey Simmons, some of you guys are bringing up. Oh, yeah, I mean, well, if they could get Jeffrey Simmons, that would be some kind of addition to the D-line. But that's what I'm saying, is that if you get a chance like that to do it, I mean, you just got to take the swing, because you're going to have the cap space in the future, depending on what happens with Sam Darnold. But when you get a shot, this is what we know. When you get a shot, you shouldn't hold on to any assets. You should just chips to the middle of the table, because if you hang on to it for next year, you might just keep hanging on to it. After 2009, they didn't make the playoffs the next year. After 2022, they didn't make the playoffs the next year. 2017, they didn't make the playoffs the next year. I mean, a lot of the times the Vikings have had their best seasons the following year has not been as good. Even from 98 to 99, Randall Cunningham couldn't play anymore after 1998, after being as good as any quarterback ever the previous season. So that's a reason to don't let that first round pick burn a hole in your pocket. If you could get an elite player that gives you a chance to win a Super Bowl, just go for it. And you don't have to apologize for trying to win the Super Bowl when you have a chance to potentially do it. That is too far down the road to really commit to at this point. We got to see what it actually looks like at the trade deadline, but that mindset might be kicking in here pretty soon, especially when you got Gilmore and Harrison Smith. You got older dudes who might not play in the league next year. You really got to go for it now. Matt says, what are the chances the Vikings are able to keep Flores after the season? He's been so instrumental. I still think the chances are very good. I do. I still think that the rest of the league is not going to give Brian Flores a head coaching job, even as good as he has been, that they are all looking for the next KOC. And here's what I know for sure is that if Sam Darnold goes into the playoffs and he's walking in to whatever stadium, maybe US Bank Stadium, the 12-5 Sam Darnold, who's facing off with whatever team, and the Vikings, all the narrative will be focused on Kevin O'Connell getting Sam Darnold there. That even as good as the Vikings defense might be and important to getting there, that will be an afterthought discussion versus Kevin O'Connell took this quarterback, reinvigorated him from nothing, made him into this, and here you go. That might hurt a little bit Brian Flores' chances, but more than anything, it's just the lawsuit. It's really just the lawsuit. Owners are going to want good soldiers. They're going to want coaches that they can ask to do whatever they want to ask them to do, and they will do it. And they won't push back on tanking. And you know, as far as the other interviews around the league go, it's going to hurt when everyone's looking for the quarterback whisperer. and his reputation is not a good one with the quarterback. All that stuff's going to play into it. TXYU says, I think Kwesi is saving cap space to sign some free agents next year to compete for the next 5 years. Plus, if they find a way to draft Travis Hunter, well, I think that that's off the table now. Travis Hunter is going to be a top 5 draft pick, and this team is not drafting in the top 5 after the way that they've started. But the cap space, yes, that's going to be a huge deal. And that's why you would consider trading for someone would be because of that. It would be because you would sign them and use the cap space that they've been able to create. Let's see. Ian says, what do you think of TJ Hawkinson's fantasy value will be when he comes back? Well, you know what? I wasn't planning on doing the underdog fantasy read, but since you asked, I mean, we might as well remind you that this show is presented by our friends at Underdog Fantasy, the easiest place to play fantasy sports, the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry. You got to check out their amazing pick'ems, which we play on the show constantly and have a lot of fun with. Easy to play. You just pick between 2 and 8 stats of your favorite players and whether they'll go higher or lower. And there are tons and tons of options, as you guys have heard, and you can win up to 20 times your money by going 5 for 5. That's our favorite part here on the show, but there's all sorts of different games you can play on Underdog Fantasy. Sign up with the code PURPLE. It helps the show if you do it. It really does. So give it a shot. I would really appreciate it. You can claim your special pick there and first-time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. So you put in your money to play. They give you bonus cash. Everybody's happy. Must be 18 or older. Terms apply. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. Okay, so thank you for that question, Ian. I think that TJ Hawkinson's fantasy value will be extremely, extremely high once he returns. If you could get your hands on him, or you already did, do it or play him, because Hawkinson is the option that they have not been able to make Johnny Munt or Josh Oliver into. He's the underneath guy. He's the safety valve. He's the one that uses the space that Justin Jefferson creates. And this, to me, could be 5 to 7 to 10 more catches. 10 is a little much, but 5-6 catches a game where you drop back, you look around, that first read isn't there, and then it's Hawkinson. And Kirk Cousins was just great at this. Use Hawkinson on those third downs when everyone's covering everybody else down the field, and he can make plays underneath. The other thing is, too, look around the league at tight ends. Everybody once again drafted Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts just ain't good. And neither is almost any tight end this year in terms of statistically. So the bar is low, and Hawkinson can, I think, make a lot of plays for this team. Let's see. Tyson says Munt and Oliver are playing well. Let Hawkinson sit until we need him. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. But it is going to be different when Hawkinson comes in. TXYU says, is Hawkinson still good? Feels like he's been gone forever. Will he still be dominant? It's an ACL. So these are things that players come back all the time from, but he's not going to be back for a few weeks. So you're going to want to keep an eye on that from a fantasy perspective. It's just, when it comes to his dominant play, the last time we saw him, he was one of the best tight ends in the league. It was a long time ago because ACLs take a long time, but it was just last season. It's just that the NFL has a very long offseason. Mike says, every talking head, I guess that's me, says Sam has scary moments. He gets reckless 3 or 4 times a game. I'm tired of this. Oh, okay. Tired of it. I'm every single good quarterback has their moments. Allen, Dak, Lamar, even Mahomes has brain farts. Relax. So this is true that good quarterbacks have to take risks. The problem is, and they do make mistakes, the problem is that we have metrics for this, man. We have numbers for this that tell us exactly how much that stuff happens to those quarterbacks. And the answer is nowhere near as much as it's happened to Sam Darnold in his career. And there are specific, I could give you the turnover worthy plays. Sam Darnold, over 4% of his plays for his career have been turnover worthy. Those quarterbacks you just named are nowhere near that number. They're half that number. And that's the difference in the NFL between a great quarterback and an okay quarterback or not a great one, is how often you're turning over the ball and making big mistakes. So, and when a guy has a reputation in the past of being an interception machine, having more turnover worthy plays than big time throws, then we will go back to that when we're talking about a small sample size and the fact that he just did it. The scariest thing, and here's why I know this comment of yours is trying to talk yourself into it more than it is a legitimate argument, is because if I asked you about the Packers game, how did you feel about Sam Darnold? If you don't bring up a strip sack, an interception in the red zone, a near interception to start the game, sometimes where he got sacked and got pressured, well, then you didn't watch the game. Of course, it's part of it. That doesn't mean I was looking at it as he could make some more mistakes than he did in the past, and he actually has more leeway. He has more easy throws, more guys who are wide open, more opportunities with a defense that gets stops to make a mistake and not feel like he's ruined the game if he does it. But he can't be one of those quarterbacks that you named having 3 turnover worthy plays in a game. He needs to be the guy from the first 3 weeks that only had 1. And since you're talking about since you're talking about those elite quarterbacks, like that's what they do. Like Mahomes, every once in a while, Mahomes has a bad play, but when you look at his overall turnover worthy plays for his career, he's one of the best. And even Josh Allen has dropped significantly in his turnover worthy plays. TXYU says Kwesi has been 50-50. No, he hasn't. It's been way better than 50. They're 4-0, man. What's their career? What is their record since they took over now at this point, right? 13-4, 7-10, 4-0. That's pretty good. It's way better than 50. It's not 50-50. No way. It's not when you're talking about being the best team in football. Where were they when he took over? An 8-9 team that was firing its coach, that was stuck in purgatory. Where are they going? How are they going to get out of this? Who's this team even going to be when he takes over as general manager? Now they're 4-0. We're talking about being the best team in the NFC, maybe. I mean, I don't know. His draft. You guys just love the draft. Some of you just love the draft. I'm not concerned about the draft very much when you just signed all these players who have made this one of the best teams in the league. Just not that concerned about a draft from several years ago that they actually still got a really important receiver out of, a starting guard who's now on his 3rd year of starting. I know he hasn't been great, but a key running back at times. It's not really as catastrophic as you make it sound. I don't think if you're judging a GM just by one draft, I don't know what we're doing here, because I do it on a much bigger scale, a much bigger picture. Where is the franchise? Do they have a chance to win? Do they have a future that says they have a chance to win? Have you formulated a plan, followed it, and gotten to the point where you are in position to actually win something? And the answer is yes. That's not 50-50. That's more like 95%, with one miss being this draft that everyone is obsessed over. I thought at 4-0 that this freaking draft wouldn't come up, and yet somehow it still does. It's kind of unbelievable. I mean, I'm just, the last thing I'm concerned about is a safety that they didn't need not working out from 2 years ago. I mean, this is the over discussion about every draft when they went out and signed all these great players who have all been excellent for them. I don't really get that even coming up. Trent says, talk me into next year's first for Dexter Lawrence. It's not hard. Dexter Lawrence. I did it. I just said his name with enthusiasm. I mean, I would do that in a second. Are you kidding me? In a second, I would trade for Dexter Lawrence. This defense with Dexter Lawrence would be absolutely insane. Let's see. Jason says Denver's DJ Jones rumored to be on the trade block. Might be worth looking into. Yeah, that wouldn't take a first-round pick, which is definitely also in the mix. Jeffrey Simmons, you guys are bringing up. I'm into it. I am into that idea of just going all in. What if they get there and they're sitting at, what was it last year? It was, what were they last year? 4-4, and they didn't trade everything away. If they are 6-2 or better, 6-2, make the move. Go for it. Is the Faithful says the only trade I could think would be for a cornerback, but that's about it. Maybe a defensive tackle to stuff the run. No, I mean, if there is a pass rushing defensive tackle, then absolutely go for it. Landon says, have you seen JJ McCarthy around the facility? I have. Yep. On his little scooter. What kind of work do you think they have him doing? He is going to meetings, meeting with KOC, going through the game prep, just learning how to be an NFL quarterback without any of the quarterbacking. But yep, I've seen him. It's funny because he'll scooter into the locker room sometimes and scooter by, vroom, like, was that JJ? I think it was. But he should be getting off that eventually and be able to get on the sideline. But yeah, I mean, he's going through the process as if he was a part of the quarterback room and learning how that all works. And he's watching Sam Darnold play NFL quarterback, which I think is extremely valuable. Conrad says, I would put my chips on Dexter Lawrence. Do you think the defense was getting gassed in the second half of the game because it involves too much feigning and bluffing, I think you mean, and man-to-man? No, I actually, I don't think that they were getting gassed. To some extent, yes, because it was hot out, and you're also talking about an offense that had a couple 3-and-outs there, and they had to go right back on the field. But I think it was really the simplest explanation is probably the right one, that, well, one, when you fumble the ball as Darnold and you just give it to the other team at the whatever yard line, 20-yard line, then they're going to score pretty easily there. But a major part of the longer drives is just playing a little too soft and playing back a little too much. And I don't remember, maybe it was Kamu Grugier-Hill said, or Blake Cashman, that they felt like, well, they're going to have to throw it short and underneath. And they just said, no, we're actually going to have this quarterback roll around and make plays and throw it down the field. We're still going to be very aggressive when it came to throwing downfield, because they have a quarterback with the arm to do it. And that hitting on a handful of those big plays was really the cause. Mike says, don't you think it's refreshing to see our best player finally getting into the end zone consistently, 50-50 gritty in their end zone? Yeah, I don't really care who scores the touchdowns. I was never too worried about the fact that Jefferson wasn't the guy, because if you watched it on tape, you would see all the defense putting so much emphasis on Jefferson. It really just matters that they do. And in the red zone, this has been a really good team so far. They have been mostly effective. That 4th and 1 they failed on, but they've been mostly effective in the red zone. But it doesn't matter to me how you get there. That throw to Justin Jefferson, though, that's actually the bigger takeaway, is when Justin Jefferson has one-on-one, if he ever gets it, throw it to him immediately. I don't care what the rest of the play is. Take a step back, let it go in his direction. That's the way to do it. And Sam Darnold has seemingly figured that out, and resulted in one of the best catches I've seen Justin make, and might not have even been the best catch of the day. How crazy is that? So, I mean, yeah, some of you are suggesting Dexter Lawrence might not be tradable. Yeah, that's most certainly true. It is that if I was the Giants, I would not be trading him. But Jeffrey Simmons, that could happen. So, all right. I have reached the bottom of the list of all of your comments, and it was a really good chat tonight. This was really fun. And 12-5 is where Manny's got them. We'll see how it plays out. A lot to discuss this week, though. Jeremiah Searles on the show. I have booked Mike Sando of The Athletic to talk about what he heard from executives this offseason on Sam Darnold. So that's going to happen later in the week. We're going to talk on Thursday. So I'll probably publish that later in the day on Thursday. Live show Wednesday night is our live chat that we always do from 7 to 9 or beyond, which means make sure you're there, because I answer every question that I can on Wednesday night. That show completely belongs to you guys. And then for London, I'm not going. The Purple Insider budget was spent a lot on the owners' meetings, Combine, Chicago, Green Bay, or Chicago later this year, Jacksonville, LA. So I've spent a lot of the budget. But the more you guys sign up at Underdog Fantasy tell your friends, subscribe, check out the newsletter. Maybe the next London game we'll do. But I will be here for that one, watching it in the morning with you guys. But we will still have a live post-game show, as always, with myself and Dane Mizutani. It's a fun time, folks. Enjoy it. Drink it in. So thank you for